Nairi adjusted her appearance in the mirror, watching as the faint bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin faded to invisibility. After 5 Earth years, the transformation had become second nature, suppressed the natural glow of her Australian biology, round the slight points of her ears, and dim the violet undertones in her eyes to a more human hazel. "Another day among the star-blind," she murmured, using the Australian term for humans, beings who lived their entire lives without feeling the cosmic connections that were as natural as breathing to her people. Her apartment in Boston overlooked MIT's Biological Sciences complex, where she had secured a position as a research assistant. The irony wasn't lost on her, an alien studying how humans studied aliens. The perfect cover for her mission. Nairi's communication crystal pulsed softly on her nightstand. She pressed her finger to it, allowing the psychic connection to form. "Report, Observer Nairi," came the telepathic voice of Commander Thale. "The humans have accelerated their hybridization program," she responded silently. "They've obtained 15 more Australian genetic samples from the crashed scout ship. They believe they're close to stabilizing the genome." "Unacceptable, the fate of the hybrid offspring." Nairi closed her eyes, the images still raw in her mind. "Suffering. The human scientists see them as lab specimens, not sentient beings. Their neural patterns show constant pain from the incompatible psychic structures." She didn't share how she had stayed late in the lab last night, singing ancient Australian lullabies telepathically to soothe the hybrid children as they wept in their sterile chambers. How one small hybrid girl with eyes almost like hers had reached for her through the glass. "Your emotional involvement compromises your objectivity," Thale observed through their link. "Remember your purpose there." "I remember all too well," Nairi replied, her inner voice turning cold. "My twin was in the first batch of hybrids. I witnessed what they did to him." 20 years earlier, humans had captured an Australian exploration vessel. Rather than establish diplomatic contact, they had secretly harvested genetic material and begun experiments to access Australian psychic abilities through controlled breeding programs. The results had been catastrophic. Hybrid children with incompatible physiologies, their bodies at war with themselves, their minds trapped between 2 forms of consciousness. Nairi moved to her kitchenette, preparing the bitter human drink, coffee, she had grown accustomed to. Her mission had originally been simple observation, but everything had changed 3 months ago when she accessed the classified files on Project Starseed. The humans planned to expand their hybrid program exponentially. They intended to create a generation of hybrids with Australian psychic abilities that they could control from birth, living weapons with no allegiance to their Australian heritage. "I've made contact with Dr. Marcus Wells," she told Thale. "He's impressed with my research proposals. I'll have access to the main laboratory within weeks." "Good, observe only. The Council is still debating intervention options." The communication ended, and Nairi let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. What she hadn't told Thale was that she had already begun her own intervention. She opened her personal tablet, reviewing her private research. Her unique genetic structure contained a rare sequence that, when properly modified, could ensure that human and Australian DNA would never successfully combine again. Not a weapon of destruction, but of separation. A genetic barrier that would protect future generations of her kind from being harvested for their abilities. Nairi gathered her research materials and headed to MIT. In the lab, she nodded cordially to her human colleagues, playing her role perfectly. Dr. Marcus Wells greeted her with particular warmth, his eyes lingering on her longer than professional courtesy required. "Nairi, I've been reviewing your proposal on xenogenetic compatibility factors. Brilliant work. I'd like to discuss it over dinner tonight." She smiled, knowing this was the opportunity she had been cultivating. "I'd be delighted, Dr. Wells." As she worked through the day, Nairi watched the researchers examine the hybrid tissue samples with cold scientific detachment. Through the reinforced door to the restricted area, she could sense the psychic pain of the hybrid children. "I'm coming for you," she promised silently, "and no Australian will ever suffer this fate again." Her plan was taking shape, a genetic revolution delivered through the most human of connections. The humans had used intimacy to create these hybrids. She would use it to ensure such abominations never occurred again. Nairi looked at her reflection in the laboratory glass. For her people, For the hybrid children who never asked to exist, she would become the end of an era, the last Australian whose blood would ever mix with humankind. Nairi's apartment was transformed into an impromptu laboratory. Specialized equipment, smuggled piece by piece from MIT's facilities, hummed softly in the background as she analyzed the results of her latest experiment. 3 weeks had passed since her dinner with Dr. Wells, a night that had yielded more than just scientific discussion. "Genetic sample obtained," she murmured, watching the human DNA strands rotate on her holographic display. Marcus Wells' genetic material, extracted from a champagne glass and a passionate goodnight kiss, was proving invaluable to her research. The display shifted, showing the incompatibility markers she was developing. The science was elegant, a retroviral vector that would alter Australian reproductive cells, creating a biological barrier against human genetic material while enhancing compatibility between Australians. Not sterilization, but redirection, ensuring her species' future would remain undiluted. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Nairi quickly concealed her equipment behind the false wall she'd installed and checked her appearance. No accidental luminescence, pupils properly rounded. "Coming," she called, adopting the casual tone she'd perfected. Darius Chen stood in her doorway, dark hair slightly disheveled, his lean frame carrying a stack of research journals and a bag that smelled distinctly of the Thai food she'd developed a fondness for. "I brought brain fuel," he said, smiling in that lopsided way that had become distressingly familiar. "And the restricted journal articles you wanted." Nairi welcomed him in, maintaining the pretense that this was merely two colleagues collaborating on research. In truth, Darius was the unexpected variable in her equation, a brilliant human geneticist whose ethics had led him to question Project Starseed. She had cultivated him as an asset, never anticipating he would become something more complicated. "You're a lifesaver," she said, taking the journals. "Did anyone question why you needed these?" Darius set down the food containers. "Perks of being the department's resident workaholic. No one blinks when I request obscure xenogenetic research at midnight." He paused, studying her face. "You look tired. The nightmares again." Nairi nodded. She had told him half-truths, that she suffered from vivid dreams about the ethical implications of their work. She hadn't mentioned that these weren't dreams but psychic impressions from the suffering hybrid children. "I accessed the restricted wing yesterday," Darius said quietly, opening the food containers. "What they're doing to those subjects, it's not science, it's torture." "You went into the hybrid ward?" Alarm shot through her. "That's incredibly dangerous, Darius. Someone needs to document what's happening." He pulled out his tablet, showing her clandestine images that made her stomach turn. Hybrid children strapped to examination tables, their partially luminescent skin patchworked with painful lesions where human and Australian biology rejected each other. Nairi turned away, her control slipping momentarily as faint lights pulsed beneath her skin. "Nairi, your skin," Darius began. "It's nothing," she said quickly. "A rare condition, light sensitivity." His eyes narrowed with the keen perception that made him both valuable and dangerous. "You know, for a brilliant geneticist, you're surprisingly uninformed about your own rare condition." The moment hung between them. Nairi calculated her options, neutralized the threat, flee, or trust. The last option terrified her most. "I need your help with something," she said instead, redirecting. "I've been developing a theory about genetic incompatibility as a protection mechanism." She showed him her legitimate research, carefully edited to conceal its true purpose. As expected, Darius was captivated by the science, his ethical concerns and suspicions temporarily forgotten as they discussed the possibilities. Hours later, surrounded by empty food containers and filled notepads, Darius looked up with new excitement. "This could be revolutionary. If we could introduce this genetic marker into the subjects, their bodies might stabilize, not fully human or Australian, but at least not in constant rejection." Nairi hadn't considered this application. "You want to help the existing hybrids." Of course, they didn't ask to be created. The passion in his voice was genuine. "The ethical response isn't to stop creating more hybrids, though we should, but to help those already suffering." This compassion was precisely why Darius complicated her plans. While she sought to prevent future hybridization, he wanted to ease the pain of those already born between worlds. I'll need access to the primary genetic sequencer, she said carefully, and fresh samples from both populations. I can get you into the high-security lab. Wells trusts me. Darius hesitated. What exactly are you planning, Nairi? She met his eyes, allowing herself one moment of near honesty, to end the suffering permanently. As Darius left that night, Nairi modified her plans. She would need to create two agents, one to establish the permanent genetic barrier between species, another to stabilize the existing hybrids. It complicated her mission, but she couldn't deny the logic, or the strange warmth she felt at Darius's determination to help those caught between worlds. Her communication crystal pulsed. Commander Thale would expect a progress report, but how could she explain that her perfect plan for vengeance was now tangled with mercy? Nairi gazed at the genetic sequences on her display. Perhaps true vengeance wasn't just about separation, but justice, protecting future generations while easing the suffering of those who existed because of human arrogance. The laboratory's ventilation system hummed softly as Nairi worked late into the night. The gene sequencer worked methodically, analyzing the latest iteration of her dual solution, one formula to prevent future hybridization, another to stabilize existing hybrids. 3 months had passed since she'd enlisted Darius's help, and they were close to a breakthrough. Too close, perhaps. The cellular binding looks promising, Darius said, examining the holographic projection of a hybrid cell structure. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He'd been working alongside her for nearly 20 hours straight. The neural degradation has slowed by 43% in the simulations. Nairi nodded, maintaining her focus on the genetic encryption she was embedding in the stabilization formula, code that would ensure the barrier agent would activate 2 weeks after administration. The humans would never know their hybrid program had been permanently disabled until it was too late. We need to test it on living tissue soon, she said carefully. Simulations can only take us so far. Darius ran a hand through his disheveled hair. Wells has scheduled a full hybrid assessment next Tuesday. We could. The laboratory door slid open unexpectedly. They both turned to see Dr. Marcus Wells entering, his usual polished appearance somewhat rumpled. Thought I might find you two here, he said, eyeing their work with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. The custodial staff reported lights in the lab at 3 a.m. Again. Nairi quickly switched the display to show only the stabilization formula. We've made significant progress on the hybrid cellular degradation issue, she explained, slipping into the role of eager researcher. The approach integrates elements from my xenogenetic compatibility theory. Wells moved closer, studying the display. His hand rested possessively on Nairi's shoulder. Impressive. I knew bringing you onto the team was the right call. His eyes shifted to Darius. Chen, would you mind grabbing the latest hybrid neural scans from my office? I'd like to compare them against your projections. After Darius left, Wells's demeanor changed subtly. You've been avoiding our private research sessions, Nairi. She maintained her composure, though her skin prickled with revulsion beneath his touch. I've been focused on this stabilization breakthrough. I thought you'd approve. Oh, I do. His fingers traced the line of her jaw. But I'm beginning to wonder where your true interests lie. You and Chen have become quite collaborative. He's brilliant, she replied neutrally, and dedicated to the hybrid subject's welfare. Wells laughed softly. Their welfare? Their research assets, not patients. He leaned closer. I've authorized the termination of the current hybrid cohort. Their degradation provides insufficient data. We'll start fresh next month with the new Australian genetic samples from the government repository. Horror flashed through Nairi, momentarily disrupting her control. A faint purple luminescence rippled beneath her skin. Wells froze, his eyes widening. What the hell? The laboratory door opened as Darius returned. Seeing the tension, he paused. Everything okay? Wells stepped back from Nairi, his scientific curiosity overriding his momentary shock. Actually, Dr. Chen, I believe our colleague has been keeping some fascinating biological secrets. His voice hardened. Security Protocol Theta 9. Before either could react, laboratory security panels slid into place, locking down the room. Emergency lights bathed everything in ominous red. Marcus, this is unnecessary, Nairi said, calculating escape scenarios. I suspected something was unusual about your genetic expertise, Wells said, his voice clinical now. Your insights into Australian biology were too intuitive. He turned to a wall panel and pressed his palm against it. Security, this is Dr. Wells. I have a code EXO-7 situation in Xenogenetics Lab 3. Darius looked between them, confusion giving way to understanding. Nairi, what's happening? Wells answered for her. Your research partner isn't human, Dr. Chen. She's an Australian infiltrator. He turned to Nairi with cold fascination. Imagine what we'll learn from dissecting a live, adult specimen. Your contribution to science will be extraordinary. Nairi's communication crystal pulsed urgently against her skin, the Australian High Council detecting her compromised situation. Emergency extraction protocols would activate soon, but not quickly enough. Darius, she said quietly, I was going to tell you. His face reflected hurt, confusion, and something else, determination. Without warning, he lunged toward the lab's emergency shower station and yanked the handle. Water cascaded from the ceiling sprinklers, triggering alarms and disrupting the security lockdown. In the chaos, Darius grabbed the vial of completed stabilization formula and pressed it into Nairi's hand. Whatever you're really planning, he whispered urgently, make it right. Security forces burst through the door as Nairi's skin fully illuminated, her Australian biology responding to the threat. Wells backed against the wall, his scientific detachment crumbling in the face of the otherworldly sight before him. You've been breeding war slaves, Nairi said, her voice resonating with harmonics impossible for human vocal cords. Children torn between worlds, suffering for your ambition. They're the future, Wells insisted. Human adaptability with Australian abilities, the next evolutionary step. They're abominations, Nairi hissed, the word tasting bitter. Condemned to agony by your arrogance. The security team hesitated, transfixed by her transformation. Nairi used the moment to inject herself with the barrier agent, ensuring that even if she was captured, her biology would begin the process of becoming incompatible with human DNA. Darius stepped between her and the security team. This ends now, he declared. I've transmitted evidence of ethics violations in Project Starseed to the Scientific Oversight Committee. Wells laughed coldly. Project Starseed has government clearance above any ethics committee. Not above public opinion, Darius countered, or international law regarding sentient rights. Nairi felt the familiar sensation of molecular displacement as the Australian extraction beam began to lock onto her position. She had seconds to decide, leave alone or take Darius with her. Either choice carried impossible consequences. The hybrid children, she said urgently to Darius. Whatever happens, save them. As the extraction beam intensified, Nairi made her choice, one that would determine not just her fate, but the future relationship between their species. The mission, her vengeance, her growing feelings for Darius, and the innocent hybrid children caught between worlds, all hung in perfect, impossible balance. The extraction beam enveloped Nairi in prismatic light, molecules tingling as they prepared for displacement. In that fractional moment before transport, she reached out and grasped Darius's wrist, pulling him into the beam's radius. Hold on, she commanded as reality dissolved around them. They materialized in a crystalline chamber aboard the cloaked Australian surveillance vessel orbiting Earth. Darius collapsed to his knees, gasping, his human physiology struggling with the aftereffects of unexpected molecular transport. Where are we? He managed, looking up at the curved walls that pulsed with living light. My extraction point, Nairi answered, her natural form now fully expressed, skin luminescent with swirling patterns, eyes large and vibrant violet, the delicate points of her ears no longer hidden. And now we're both fugitives. 3 Australians entered the chamber, their expressions shifting from alert to shock when they saw Darius. Observer Nairi, explain this breach of protocol, demanded the tallest one, whom Nairi addressed as Commander Thale. He's essential to our mission, she replied firmly. He knows the hybrid facility's security protocols and has access to the children. Thale's luminescent patterns darkened with disapproval. The Council ordered your extraction because your cover was compromised. Bringing a human aboard violates every security directive. The directive to protect our people supersedes protocol, Nairi countered. She turned to Darius, who was staring at her true form with undisguised wonder. Dr. Wells will destroy the hybrid children now that he knows I've infiltrated the project. We have hours at most. Darius finally found his voice. This is real, you're actually. He looked around the alien vessel. All this time you were gathering intelligence. Yes, Nairi acknowledged, but my mission evolved. She retrieved the vial of genetic formula from her pocket. This can still stabilize the existing hybrids, prevent their suffering. And what about the other formula? Darius asked pointedly. The one you've been developing separately. The chamber fell silent. Thal's bioluminescent patterns intensified. What other formula? Nairi met Darius's gaze steadily. A permanent genetic barrier between our species. Once introduced into the Australian genome, it will make hybridization with humans biologically impossible. You planned this from the beginning, Darius realized. Not just intelligence gathering, genetic revenge. Protection, she corrected, ensuring no more children suffer between worlds. Commander Thale approached the view screen showing Earth below. The Council will approve. This ends the human threat permanently without violence. And what about the existing hybrids? Darius challenged, standing despite his disorientation. Will your protection abandon those children to die? We will retrieve what is ours, Thale stated coldly. The genetic material are captured scouts. They're not just genetic material, Darius interrupted. They're children, living, feeling beings caught between your worlds. Nairi placed a hand on his arm. This is why I brought you. We need someone who sees them as more than experiments or assets. She turned to Thale. The stabilization formula works. We can save the existing hybrids while preventing future ones. The commander considered this. The Council would prefer a cleaner solution. Since when does clean equal right? Nairi challenged. We're not humans discarding lives for convenience. After intense negotiation, a compromise was reached. They would infiltrate the research facility, administer the stabilization formula to the hybrids, and extract them to an Australian sanctuary moon. Simultaneously, the barrier agent would be released into the Earth's atmosphere, subtly altering Australian biology worldwide to prevent further hybridization. As the Australians prepared for the mission, Darius pulled Nairi aside. You used me, he said quietly. Yes, she admitted, her luminescence dimming with regret. Initially. And us, the connection I thought we had, was that part of your infiltration too? Nairi's patterns shifted in a complex emotion humans had no word for, something between remorse and revelation. It was unexpected, problematic. Darius studied her alien features, searching for the woman he'd come to care for. You look so different, yet I still see you. Because I am still me, she replied. The disguise was physical, not internal. Their moment was interrupted when the ship's sensors detected a massive security mobilization at the research facility. Wells isn't waiting, Darius realized with alarm. He's moving the hybrids now. Surveillance showed military transport vehicles arriving at the facility. Through the ship's enhanced monitoring, they watched as medical pods containing the sedated hybrid children were loaded for transport. They're taking them to the secondary facility in Nevada, Darius explained. Underground bunker virtually impenetrable. Commander Thale turned to his tactical officers. Prepare for emergency intervention. We'll intercept the transports before they reach the secure facility. No, Nairi countered. A direct attack will trigger an international response. We need subtlety. She turned to Darius. What's the transport's security protocol? Biometric, he answered. Wells and 3 senior researchers have clearance. A daring plan formed. Using the Australian vessel's advanced technology, they generated a perfect holographic disguise for Nairi, not as herself, but as Dr. Wells. Meanwhile, Darius would use his legitimate access to approach the convoy under the pretense of monitoring the hybrid's vital signs during transport. It's too dangerous, Thale objected, if you're discovered. Every moment we debate, those children suffer, Nairi replied, already adjusting the holographic projector. Besides, I've been deceiving humans for years. One more performance won't be difficult. As they prepared to return to Earth, Darius caught Nairi's arm. There's something you should know. I suspected what you were weeks ago. Nairi froze. What? Your cellular samples in the lab, they had anomalies no human condition could explain. His eyes held hers. I knew, and I helped you anyway. Why? Because I saw your reaction when you thought no one was watching, how you looked at those children with more compassion than any of the human researchers." He hesitated. "And because I believed whatever you were planning couldn't be worse than what we were doing." The revelation hung between them as they prepared for their most dangerous deception. Hours later, Dr. Wells approached the military convoy at a refueling checkpoint, Darius at his side with medical credentials ready. The moment of truth had arrived, and with it, the future of both their species. The desert highway stretched endlessly under the moonlight as the military convoy carrying the hybrid children rumbled toward the Nevada facility. Nairi, wearing Dr. Wells' holographic disguise, walked alongside the lead transport vehicle, her heart thundering beneath the projected human appearance. "Authorization confirmed, Dr. Wells," the security officer stated after scanning the forged credentials. "Unusual to see you in the field, sir." "These specimens represent 20 years of research," Nairi replied in Wells' clipped tones. "Given recent security concerns, I'm personally overseeing their transfer." Beside her, Darius presented his own credentials. "Dr. Chen, monitoring vital signs during transport. The subject's stability is critical at this stage." The guard nodded, motioning them toward the medical transport, a converted military vehicle with reinforced walls and advanced life support systems. Inside, 12 stasis pods were arranged in rows, each containing a sedated hybrid child. The sight made Nairi's concealed luminescence flicker dangerously beneath her holographic disguise. "Begin your examinations," she ordered in Wells' voice for the benefit of the guards. "I'll verify the containment protocols." Once the door closed behind them, Darius immediately moved to the security panel. "We have 15 minutes before they expect a status update. The surveillance feeds are looping now." Nairi deactivated her holographic disguise, revealing her true Australian form. She moved swiftly between the stasis pods, gazing at each child. Some appeared nearly human with just hints of Australian bioluminescence beneath their skin. Others had more pronounced alien features partially masked by human characteristics. All showed signs of cellular degradation where incompatible biologies fought for dominance. "They've been increasing the sedation doses," Darius noted grimly, checking the medical readouts. "Their systems are shutting down." Nairi removed the stabilization formula from a concealed compartment. "This needs to be administered directly into their primary circulatory system." Working together, they moved methodically from pod to pod, injecting each child with the formula designed to harmonize their conflicting biologies. With each injection, Nairi established a brief psychic connection, offering comfort to the confused, frightened minds trapped in sedated bodies. "I'm sorry," she whispered to a young girl whose features reminded her painfully of her lost twin. "No more pain soon." As they reached the final pod, an alarm blared. The transport vehicle lurched to a stop. "Perimeter breach detected," announced an automated voice over the intercom. "Unknown aircraft in restricted airspace." Darius looked up in alarm. "The extraction team." Nairi shook her head. "They wouldn't compromise the mission." She reactivated her holographic disguise just as the transport door slammed open. The real Dr. Wells stood in the doorway, flanked by armed guards, his face contorted with rage. "Imposter," he spat. "Security protocols detected luminescent energy signatures inside this transport. Did you think our sensors wouldn't recognize Australian biology?" The guards raised their weapons. Nairi stepped forward, still wearing Wells' face, a surreal confrontation of identical figures. "Shoot them both," Wells commanded. "The specimens are too valuable to risk." "Wait," Darius moved between the guards and Nairi. "These children are dying from your experiments. We've stabilized them. Their cellular degradation will stop." Wells sneered. "Degradation is merely an evolutionary hurdle. The next generation will be perfected." "There won't be a next generation," Nairi stated, her holographic disguise dissolving to reveal her true form. The guards stepped back in shock. "I've ensured that no Australian DNA will ever successfully merge with human genetics again." Wells' scientific curiosity momentarily overtook his anger. "Impossible. You can't rewrite an entire species' genetic code." "I didn't have to," Nairi replied. "The barrier agent is adaptive, transmitted through air, water, touch, spreading from Australian to Australian. It's already circulating through our population, enhancing our natural immunity to foreign genetic material." The ground suddenly trembled beneath them. Outside, a blinding light engulfed the entire convoy as the cloaked Australian vessel revealed itself. Extraction beams activated simultaneously across all transport vehicles. Now, Nairi shouted. Darius slammed his hand against the emergency release for all stasis pods. As the pods opened, the molecular displacement beams locked onto the hybrid children, who began to dissolve into particles of light. Wells lunged forward. You're stealing my life's work. We're saving our children, Nairi corrected, stepping into an extraction beam herself. Darius hesitated at the edge of his own beam, looking back at the human world he was about to leave behind. Are you certain? Nairi asked, her form already beginning to disperse. There's nothing for me here now, he answered, reaching toward her luminescent hand. As they materialized aboard the Australian vessel, chaos erupted. The hybrid children, now awakening from sedation, were disoriented and frightened. Australian medical specialists moved among them, continuing the stabilization treatments Nairi and Darius had begun. Commander Thale approached them. The barrier agent has been deployed through Earth's atmosphere. Our scout ships confirm it's already affecting Australian biology worldwide. No future hybridization will be possible. And the children? Nairi asked, watching as the youngest hybrid, barely 3 Earth years old, was gently cradled by an Australian healer. The Council has granted them sanctuary on Lyria Colony. They'll never be fully Australian or human, but they'll live without pain. Thale looked pointedly at Darius. The Council is uncertain about our human guest. Darius stood straighter. I've committed treason against my own government to help these children. I can't go back. 6 months later, on the sanctuary moon of Lyria, Nairi stood on a crystalline observation deck watching the hybrid children play in adapted gardens. Their once deteriorating bodies had stabilized, their dual natures now in harmony rather than conflict. They would never be fully Australian or fully human. Instead, they had become something new, a bridge between worlds that could never again be crossed genetically. Darius joined her, his human biology adjusting gradually to Australian environments with medical assistance. The educational specialists say they're learning at an extraordinary rate, human adaptability with Australian perception. They're the last of their kind, Nairi said quietly, a closed chapter. Not entirely closed, Darius turned to her. Your revenge created separation, but these children represent a different possibility, coexistence without exploitation. Nairi's luminescent patterns shifted in contemplation. The Council is considering opening diplomatic channels with Earth, not genetic exchange, but knowledge exchange. From vengeance to vision, Darius murmured, his hand finding hers, careful not to disrupt her natural luminescence. Not what you planned. No, she admitted, watching as an Australian teacher helped a hybrid child control her emerging psychic abilities. My plan was simpler, permanent genetic isolation. And now, Nairi turned to face the human who had chosen exile among aliens rather than comfort among his own kind. Now, I understand that true transformation isn't about erasing connections, it's about finding the right ones. Beyond the observation window, stars gleamed in the darkness between worlds, separate, distinct, yet part of the same cosmic tapestry. Like the two species whose futures were now forever biologically distinct, yet bound by the bridge these children represented. Some barriers, Nairi said softly, her luminescence harmonizing with Darius's touch, are meant to protect, not divide.